For whatever reason, the word gimmick has a pretty negative connotation to it. We often refer to games as gimmicky if they have some one distinguishing feature to otherwise try to get our minds off the fact that they're big copies of other previous, better, more successful games. So sometimes we'll concentrate on that gimmick and talk about how it's just a throwaway feature or something like that. But there's nothing wrong with a game having a gimmick if the rest of the game is very good, and Boktai, The Sun is in Your Hand, is such a game. It's a genuinely innovative game. There's absolutely nothing else like it, and at heart, it's a game that's much like The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past or other kind of old-school 16-bit isometric action-adventure games. So on that level, it's an excellent, very well-done game, and it also happens to have this very unique feature in that it uses the sun. The game has a built-in solar sensor on it, and indeed, sometimes it requires you to play where it's sunny. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to play outside. If you're more inclined to stay at home next to a window or something like that, that's perfectly acceptable. But indeed, you do need to use the sunlight in order to get through the game, and sunlight plays a very big role throughout the game and makes for a very interesting experience. Fans of Metal Gear Solid and designer Hideo Kojima's other work will recognize some of this designer's rather kind of innovative and artist-like maneuverings in the design of this game. It has a number of very surprising and very unique moments that take advantage of the game's solar sensor as well as its built-in real-time clock. So in the end, Boktai is a very unusual and a very recommendable game that has a lot of basic appeal that other action-adventure games have, as well as something that none of them do, not even games on your fancy PlayStation 2s and Xboxes, since you can't well carry those outside into the sun. In the game, you play as Solar Boy Django, who is partnered up with this sunflower-like character named Otenko, Master Otenko, actually. This is a character who's spouting with wisdom and helps Django along, and explains to him that he wields the legendary power of the Gundel Soul, which is a gun that harnesses the power of the sun and is the only means by which Django can rid the world of the immortals, which are basically these undead creatures that are otherwise unstoppable. They're only vulnerable to the concentrated power of sunlight. The way the sun works with the game essentially is to recharge the Gundel Soul. When you first begin, you might as well start playing when it's sunny out, because soon enough the gun is going to run out of juice and you're going to have no way of fighting back. So that's kind of a problem, and if it's sunny out, you could just hit one of the buttons and you'll see as Django charges his gun back up. The sunnier it is, the hotter the sun is beating down on the sensor, the more quickly you'll recover your energy, but you can't play out in the sun too long, otherwise the gun is going to overheat. So that's kind of a little twist. And in fact, as you play the game longer, you'll find that it's not just a straightforward matter of you gotta play Boktai out in the sun. There's more to it than that. There are actually some cases, without spoiling anything, where you don't want to be out in the sun when you're playing. It becomes a disadvantage all of a sudden, and the way the game mixes this up is really quite interesting. And sure, it's gimmicky to some extent, but again, there's nothing else like it. It's a totally unique experience. Also, interestingly enough, as you get further and further into the game, you find bigger batteries for your gun, and you find these items called solar nuts, and you store up solar power actually in these stations, so you get to where you really don't need to play the game out in the sun as much. You do need to battle the immortals, the game's big bosses, when it's sunny out, because these battles involve actually channeling the sunlight straight into them and kind of burning them to a crisp until they're finally destroyed. But those are the only cases really where you have to play Boktai when it's sunny out. So if you're weirded out by the whole thing, if you're worried that the fall is rolling around and it's going to be all foggy most of the time, that shouldn't really deter you from the game. You only need to play it on sunny days once in a while, I'd say. Again, the gameplay itself is reminiscent of the older Zelda titles, for example. You view the action from an isometric perspective, and as Django, you've got a few Metal Gear Solid-like moves. You can flatten your back against the wall and knock to create a diversion, which will send the enemies skimpering your way, and you could sidle up against a wall, and this is useful for getting past certain types of enemies and so forth. So it may look like it's a stealth action game at first, but fortunately, I'd say the stealth options are really quite optional, and you don't need to take a stealthy approach through the game, although you're ranked at the end of each sequence based on your performance, and the more cleanly and more stealthily you get through a sequence, the higher a score you'll get. The game's got a great mix of action, exploration, and puzzle solving. Some of the puzzles are pretty straightforward, just kind of block-pushing deals or pressure plates, things like that. Others are much more interesting, especially later on in the game. Again, the game's got a number of rather interesting puzzles that involve sunlight somehow, and you'll actually see sunlight manifest itself in the game world in real time. For example, if you're playing the game when it's sunny, you might see sun seeping through the windows of a haunted mansion, and that's where you can stand to recharge your solar energy. Whereas if you're not playing in the sun, that sun won't be there. The game also has a day-night cycle, so it's dark when you play at night and that sort of thing. So again, this adds to kind of the unique style that Boktai has. The game actually looks and sounds excellent for a Game Boy Advance game. It looks and sounds as good or even better than any 16-bit kind of Super Nintendo game ever released, anything like that. It's really quite impressive on the GBA. The animation and the character designs look great. The game uses a lot of speech, actually, which is not only well acted, but also just very crisply recorded and just gives the game remarkably good production values for a GBA title. And it features some really, really outstanding boss battles, actually, in what's maybe another nod to some of Hideo Kojima's previous work. When you get to these immortals, you need to beat them down fair and square the first time as they kind of rain a bunch of powerful attacks against you. And once you do, then they're shut into their coffins, and then you need to drag the coffin back outside of their lair, lock it into this kind of what's called a pile driver, this device that channels solar energy into them, and then you start zapping them for a while as they desperately try to fight you off until you finally destroy them once and for all. These battles are pretty memorable. They're quite well done and are definitely some of the best parts of Boktai. So Boktai is a game with a really clever gimmick, but it doesn't use its gimmick as a crutch. It's just a really great action-adventure game in its own right. It's even got an interesting and, dare I say, somewhat emotional story to it. It's suitable for all audiences. It looks and sounds great. It plays well. It's just a really nice little game to have on the Game Boy Advance, and obviously it makes a very innovative use of the fact that it's a portable game. It's designed to be played in different places, and that's something that simply isn't possible with other platforms. So if you're interested in playing a really great game for the GBA, let alone if you're interested in just playing something rather progressive and unique, then by all means give Boktai a try.